War had always been fought on land and sea, where armies marched and ships maneuvered. But in 1914, as the world descended into conflict, a new battlefield emerged. Vast, shifting, unpredictable, and infinite. For the first time in history, humans carried their struggle into the sky. The First World War transformed aviation from a fragile curiosity into a decisive instrument of reconnaissance, destruction, and innovation. The airplane, barely a decade old, became a weapon. The skies became a new frontier of conflict, where fragile wings and exposed engines carried pilots into battles without maps, without precedent, and often without hope of return. This is the story of that new battlefield, a world above trenches and oceans, where courage, machinery, weather, and invention collided to reshape the nature of warfare forever. In 1914, aircraft were wooden frames covered in fabric, powered by unreliable engines, and guided by pilots wearing leather caps and goggles. Their speed, altitude, and durability were limited. Many military officials believed they had no real value in war. But commanders soon learned that what aircraft lacked in strength, they made up for in perspective. From the sky, the complex movements of armies became visible. The maze of trenches, invisible from the ground, became clear patterns. Railway yards, supply depots, artillery positions, and troop concentrations revealed themselves in ways no scout on horseback could achieve. The first role of aircraft was simple: observation. Pilots leaned from open cockpits with handwritten notes, cameras, or binoculars. They circled above battlefields to report enemy maneuvers. They became the eyes of generals, extending vision beyond horizons. The sky, once a symbol of freedom, turned into a platform for surveillance. As trench lines hardened across Europe, reconnaissance became indispensable. Static warfare demanded detailed understanding of enemy positions, and only aircraft could provide it. Cameras mounted on planes captured images of extraordinary clarity. From these photographs, analysts built enormous maps of trenches, fortifications, and artillery placements. Every curve of barbed wire, every dugout, every battery became part of an ever-shifting picture. Observation balloons also became essential. Tethered to the ground, suspended high enough to survey miles of territory, these gas-filled sentinels monitored enemy activities. Balloon observers communicated by telephone, adjusting artillery fire with remarkable accuracy. The sky slowly filled with shapes, wings of wood and canvas, balloons tethered to earth by ropes, all watching, measuring, recording. The war had gained a third dimension. At first, enemy pilots waved at each other as they passed. Soon after, they carried pistols and rifles to shoot at rivals during encounters. Then, engineers mounted machine guns to wings and fuselages. Aerial reconnaissance became aerial combat. Two aircraft meeting in the sky were no longer observers. They were adversaries. The introduction of synchronized gears that allowed machine guns to fire through propeller arcs revolutionized the air war. Pilots could now aim the entire aircraft at an enemy and fire without destroying their own propellers. The age of the fighter plane had begun. Above the trenches, duels unfolded, twisting spirals, sudden dives, daring climbs, and final plunges into Earth. The sky became a stage for violence unlike anything before. Battles without trenches, without cover, without ground. Every pilot knew the odds. Every pilot flew anyway. Aviators lived in a world apart from the infantry. They were not spared hardship, but their hardship was different. Pilots trained quickly, too quickly, because losses were high. Many had only a few hours of flight experience before entering combat. Their aircraft were lightweight, fragile, and unforgiving. Engines failed. Wings splintered. Weather shifted suddenly. Parachutes were not widely issued early in the war, considered unnecessary or even cowardly. Flying was a mixture of exhilaration and terror. The cold at high altitude cut through clothing engines. Rattled unpredictably, fuel fumes filled cockpits. Wind roared louder than artillery visibility shifted with clouds and sun. Above all, pilots flew alone or in small formations. The sky isolated them completely, separated from trenches below, exposed to enemies above. Life expectancy for new pilots was brutally short. The romance of flying evaporated quickly, replaced by the stark reality that few survived long enough to grow old. Despite the dangers, aviation created a new kind of hero, the flying ace. An ace was a pilot credited with multiple aerial victories. In a war of mud and stalemate, aces became symbols of individual skill and daring. Their feats offered nations stories of precision and bravery amid the chaos of industrial slaughter. They flew distinctive aircraft, painted with personal colors or emblems. Their names traveled widely across newspapers and conversations. They became icons of a war that otherwise buried individuality. Yet behind the legend of the ace lay the brutal truth. Most pilots who sought glory in the sky found death instead. The cult of the ace glamorized an environment where few could survive long, but it also represented a human desire to find meaning, identity, and narrative in a conflict that otherwise erased them. As aircraft grew stronger and engines improved, nations realized the potential of bombing. Bombers evolved from light planes carrying grenades tossed by hand to larger multi-engine machines capable of delivering heavy loads over long distances. Early bombing missions targeted supply depots, railways, ammunition factories, ports, troop concentrations. Later, cities became targets. Zeppelins and heavy bombers crossed coastlines to drop explosives on urban centers, introducing civilians to a new kind of terror: attack from above. The distinction between front and home front began to blur. War reached living rooms and market squares, not as distant thunder, but as falling fire. Bombing, though inefficient by modern standards, marked the beginning of strategic air warfare, a grim innovation that would define later conflicts. Long before modern bombers, Zeppelins took to the sky as silent giants. Their vast, elongated frames glided over landscapes, capable of flying great distances and carrying heavy payloads. Germany used Zeppelins for reconnaissance and bombing raids over the United Kingdom. Their appearance filled skies with dread. Searchlights swept the darkness. Anti-aircraft guns fired upward. Cities dimmed lights to confuse navigators. Zeppelins operated at altitudes difficult for early airplanes to reach, but they were vulnerable to wind, storms, and incendiary bullets. Once ignited, They fell in fiery arcs, their destruction visible for miles. Their era was brief but unforgettable. The first night raiders of the modern world. Though most stories focus on Europe, aerial warfare extended far beyond the Western Front. In the Middle East, aircraft supported desert campaigns, scouting across vast expanses of sand. In Africa, planes monitored colonial territories and engaged in limited combat. On the Eastern Front, large distances made aerial reconnaissance critical. In the Italian Alps, pilots navigated treacherous winds and mountainous terrain, flying missions through valleys and over glaciers. The sky became an international battlefield, shaped by weather, geography, and the limitations of early technology. Planes adapted, skis for snow, floats for water, reinforced frames for rough terrain, stronger engines for high altitudes. Aviation became global before the word globalization existed. The Great War accelerated aviation technology more than any event in history. Engineers experimented relentlessly. Manufacturers introduced lighter materials, more powerful engines, streamlined designs, synchronized machine guns, stronger propellers, better fuel systems, wind tunnels tested airflow. Factories refined production lines. Mechanics learned to coax life from damaged engines. Innovation came from necessity. The war demanded constant adaptation. Every improvement meant greater speed, higher altitude, longer range, increased survivability, more effective weapons. By 1918, aircraft had transformed from fragile craft into formidable machines. The war birthed modern aviation. Behind every pilot stood an entire community on the ground. Airfields became bustling hubs of activity. Mechanics repairing engines, riggers tightening wires, armorers loading ammunition, photographers developing reconnaissance images, signalers coordinating missions, meteorologists predicting weather tents or wooden huts housed crews. Makeshift hangars protected planes from storms. Fuel dumps, repair shops, and radio stations supported operations. Airfields were microcosms of war, order, labor, chaos, and constant preparation. Pilots may have been the faces of aerial combat, but the sky war belonged to thousands. The sky offered freedom, but also brutal constraints. Rain-soaked fuselages and ruined engines. Fog concealed runways. Wind pushed fragile aircraft off course. Ice coated wings, adding deadly weight. Cloud banks swallowed entire formations. Pilots often died without seeing an enemy. Weather remained the most powerful force in the sky. The war taught aviation a lesson that persists. Technology may evolve, but the sky always has final authority. By 1918, the air war had matured into a sophisticated system of reconnaissance, pursuit, bombing, ground attack, and communication. Aviation had become integral to strategy. No commander could ignore the sky again. When the armistice came, pilots returned home to a world forever changed. Some became instructors, engineers, or commercial pilots. Others struggled with the loss of adrenaline and identity. Many did not survive long past the war, their bodies damaged, or their spirits exhausted. But the machines they flew, the techniques they pioneered, and the lessons they learned endured. Civil aviation emerged from the ashes of war. Airmail services began. Commercial flights connected cities. Aircraft manufacturers shifted to peacetime production. The world had entered the age of flight, born from the fires of conflict. The First World War opened a frontier humanity had only dreamed of. Above trenches and oceans, men fought in a domain once reserved for birds and myths. Their machines were fragile, their futures uncertain, their world transformed with every takeoff. They looked down upon a landscape of destruction, yet saw it from a vantage never before experienced. They flew into storms, into enemy fire, into the unknown, shaping a legacy of courage, innovation, and tragedy. The sky remembers them still, not in the sound of engines or the flash of machine gun fire, but in the simple truth that flight, once a fantasy, became a necessity. The war awakened the sky, and the sky, once awakened, never slept again.